Okay, great. All right, well, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, August 4th, 2021, and this is a special meeting of the Montclair Zoning Board of Adjustment. Notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice at the municipal building and sending a copy of the notice to the Montclair Times and the Star Ledger. We'll start tonight with the roll call. Chair Harrison.
Here.
Vice Chair Fleischer.
Here.
Mr. Church.
Here.
Mr. McCullough.
Here.
Mr. Moore is not here at this time. Mr. Allen is not here at this time. Mr. Simon.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Caulfield.
Here.
And Ms. Gilmer is excused this evening, and Mr. Vieira.
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
And Graham, we don't have,
Yeah.
we don't have minutes.
Yes, we do not have minutes. The minutes of the July 21st meeting and the August 4th meeting will be scheduled for the meeting on August 18th.
Okay. We have the resolution for the new assets application on Bay Street. I don't have any changes to that resolution.
I'm getting a lot of feedback, and I almost heard nothing you said, Bill.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a fish tank.
I just fixed some of the other feedback. Yeah, if you're not speaking, if everybody could just have their lines muted, that'd be great. Okay, we should be better now.
Okay, so we have the resolution for the new assets application on Bay Street. I don't have any changes to that resolution. Does anyone else have any changes?
Move approval of the resolution as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any no votes? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, then we have the resolution for the Dolgan application on Mission Street. I have a few changes on page 1, the 5th whereas. I mean, shouldn't it be permit a maximum width the principal building of greater than 65%?
Yes.
Okay, then on page 2, in B3, in number 2, B3, to just read 2 dormers, since it's a new building, they're not additions. You see where I am?
Yep. Yeah, I made the change.
Okay, and then on page 3, just so it's clear, in condition number 1 at the end of the 3rd sentence, where it says to the rear of 71 Mission Street, but to the same extent. So it's clear that, you know, that they're matching the elimination of the parking space on the other side. Anyone else with any changes to that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
Is there a second?
Mr. Church had the second.
Okay,
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
We have the resolution for the Dolgan application on 21 New Street. I have two related changes. In number 5 on page 1, it should be the required minimum lot width is 60 feet and the lot width is 54 feet. Anyone else with any changes, other changes to that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
And then we have the resolution for the vendor application on Waterbury Road. I have one change to that in number 1 on the first page, put road after Waterbury. Anyone else with any changes to that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
second,
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Stay.
Okay, and then we have the resolution for the Gooden application on Breeman Court. In the fourth whereas, that same change, changing less than to greater than. Any other changes to that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
So second,
second,
all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Stay.
And we have the resolution for the Reimer Hirsch application on North Fullerton Avenue. On page 1, number 4, it should say North Fullerton Avenue, not Grove Street. Anyone else with any changes to that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
aye,
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Stay.
And then finally, we have the resolution for the factor application on Linden Avenue. In the third whereas, the same change from less to greater.
I am not seeing. Where is that? I'm sorry, I'm missing that on the resolution.
And the third whereas, first page.
Okay, I understand now.
Any other changes to that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
second,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
aye,
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Stay.
Graham, you want to announce the postponement?
Yeah, I'm going to make 2 announcements, Mr. Chairman, because I'm getting inundated with comments from members of the public regarding application for 268 North Mountain Avenue. As you will see on the agenda shown here on the screen, that is item F on the agenda. The board has a preceding 4 applications through which they will go before we will get to that application this evening. Furthermore, for all members of the public that are participating, you are in this meeting as what we call an attendee. You are unable to unmute your line at this point. Once the board discusses and deliberates the application for 268 North Mountain Avenue, the board will open up for public questions and comments. At that time, we will unmute the public lines for members of the public to make those questions or comment statements at that time. So just sit tight. We will get to that application when that time comes. Prior to that, as the chair has requested, application 2741 for property at 17 Godfrey Road, the applicant has requested to carry that application to the next meeting on August 18th. The application will be carried with no further notice. That's applicant Patricia Slavin.
The first application is that of Emilio G. D'Alessandro Jr., Jean D'Alessandro, and Gregory D'Alessandro and Colleen D'Alessandro, owners of the property located at 72 North Willow Street. This is an application to construct 2 parking spaces in the front yard of the subject property. The property is located in the R2 two-family zone and is designated as block 1203, lot 23. The applicant applied for a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-52 to permit parking in the front yard, whereas parking is prohibited and where such parking is prohibited under the ordinance. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes. Mr. Trembulak, I see you in the meeting, but I don't think you're all the way connected, so I cannot bring you into the meeting. I don't know if you can get reconnected in some way, but I can't bring you into the meeting because you're not all the way here. Mr. Tremblay is here representing the applicant on that application this evening. I can bring in Mr. D'Alessandro to start. Mr. D'Alessandro is here. One second. See if I can. Still can't connect, Mr. Alan, if you're here, you're going to need to log out and come back in. Mr. D'Alessandro is here in the room with us. Mr. D'Alessandro, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Are you able to get in contact with Mr. Tremblay to let him know that he should try and disconnect and reconnect?
I could call him, yes,
Yeah, if you could do that, that would be great for us. Thank you.
sure.
Okay, Mr. Tremblay just left, so hopefully he's getting reconnected now.
Hi, this is Greg D'Alessandro.
Hi, Greg. Yes.
Yeah, Alan called, well, I called him. He said that he's on the phones and he'll do it through the phone because his computer.
Oh, okay. Let me see which phone is him. Okay. Alan, is that you? Alan, is that you on the phone?
Graham?
Yes. There you are.
Right.
Hey, we can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
I apologize to the board. I don't know, my computer is very sluggish and uncooperative. I had called in earlier on the phone, but I know you didn't realize it was me. So I'm going to hopefully continue to try to connect with my computer, but we can start if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay. Want to give
All
your
right.
appearance and then see.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Apologize again for the slight delay. It's Alan Tremblay appearing on behalf of the applicants, which is several members of the D'Alessandro family, who are the owners of 72 North Willow Street. The property contains a two-family house in the R2 two-family zoning district. Like many properties on this block of North Willow Street, the property is extremely narrow. It's only 25 feet wide. The existing two-family house is almost as wide as the lot itself. Consequently, there's no garage, no driveway, and no parking spaces anywhere on the property, or which could be anywhere on the property except in the front yard. And as we'll show the board in the brief testimony we're going to present, there are a number of very similar small lots on this block of North Willow Street, many of which have existing front yard parking spaces. So we've applied for a variance to allow for front yard parking. We submitted the application requesting 2 front yard parking spaces, but candidly, after reviewing this more closely and recognizing that there's a telephone pole directly in front of the house, I think realistically, we would probably only be able to fit 1 on-site parking space. So we would amend the application to request that. I have one witness who you've already met, is on the phone, Greg in the meeting, unlike myself. So I would call Gregory D'Alessandro as my first and only witness.
Mr. D'Alessandro, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
Gregory D'Alessandro, 120 White Rock Road, Verona, New Jersey.
Okay. Greg, are you one of the owners of 72 North Willow Street?
Yes.
And how long have you owned that property?
Approximately 35 years.
Okay. Who are the other owners of the property?
My brother, Emilio, his wife, Jean, and my wife, Colleen.
Okay. And do any of you live in that house, or is it a rental property?
It's a rental.
Okay. And by the way, your family also owns the commercial building located directly next door to the north of this property. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that's the home of the D'Alessandro Auto Repair Shop?
That's correct, yes.
Property? Okay. So with respect to the property at 72 North Willow Street, does that property currently have any parking spaces on the property itself?
No, it does not.
Is there a garage or a driveway on the property?
No.
Okay. All right. So can you explain to the board why you've filed this application and why you're seeking permission to provide a parking space in the front yard of the property?
Sure. It's somewhat difficult to rent a property with no parking. We've looked into, or the renters have also looked into, parking at the Walnut Street train station, but there's usually a year wait for that, and that's also another cost for the renters. And after seeing the houses down the street, we just thought that we could apply for parking to make it easier to rent the apartments.
Okay. So you mentioned other properties on the street. So are you aware of other properties on this same block that have existing front yard parking spaces?
Yes. A couple houses right next door have it.
Okay. I'd like, Graham, I provided some photos that we'd like to introduce as
Yes.
exhibits.
And we pretty much, this
6 of
will
them.
be Exhibit A1. It's a series of 6 photographs provided by the applicant. They're being shown now on the screen. This is the first of the
Okay.
6.
And I can't see them, but I know I have them in front of me.
We're on the first photo
Greg,
for your
Right. Before we discuss the photos, I just need to ask a couple of preliminary questions. These photos that we're going to be discussing, The photos were not taken by you, were they?
Were you asking if they were taken by me? Because you kind of broke up there.
Yes, that was my question. You
Oh,
didn't take these photos, did you?
No,
Okay. In fact, I took them and showed them to you earlier today, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And have you looked, you're familiar with those properties and the photos that are going to be displayed on the screen, correct?
yes,
Okay. And do the photos accurately depict existing conditions of these properties as of approximately 1 o'clock this afternoon?
that's correct.
Okay, so I'd just like to go through them one at a time and just ask you to identify the properties. So the first photo, what property is that?
It's 72 North Willow.
All right, that's your property that we're discussing tonight, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Next photo, Graham?
That's 70 and a half North Willow, right next door.
All right, that's right next door to your property at 72?
Yes,
Okay. And that shows a vehicle parked in the front yard, correct?
yes.
Okay. And next photo, please.
That's 70 North Willow.
The next house down from the last photo, is that right?
Yes,
With two cars parked in the front yard.
that's correct.
Okay, next photo.
That's 60 North Willow.
A little bit further down the block towards Claremont Avenue, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and then the next photo after that.
That's that's the corner house on 157 Claremont. It's more to the
And
left.
the house on the right is 60 North Willow that we just
yeah.
looked at with the last photo.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, and then the last photograph in the series, what property is that?
That's 59 North Willow.
Okay.
Not sure what happened.
Alan, you should be okay again. Oop. Oh, hang on. Oh, I see. Alan, he tried to join again from his computer. Alan, I think you're gonna have to call back in. Alan, can you hear us?
Well, I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, I apologize again. It seemed like I was connecting by video, so I shut my phone off and then I lost the video connection. So I apologize. But that actually, I'll ask one last question from Mr. D'Alessandro. Greg, those properties that we just looked at that have existing front yard parking spaces, do you know if any of those are, were legally approved by this board or any other board in town?
I don't know for sure, no.
Okay, all right. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
Oh, I mean, Mr. Trinity, I just asked the basic question. I mean, a lot of people build a lot of illegal things, and we've faced this issue for at least 25 years. There are many properties in this town that have no ability to get a driveway, and the only place they can park is in front of their houses. And in every application, we've turned them down because there's nothing in the zoning ordinance other than to change the zoning ordinance in places that don't have sufficient space to provide for a driveway. And I know we've spoken about it before. I don't even know where to go with this because I'm certain it didn't come before us, any of those other ones in all the years I've been on the board. And we would probably not have approved it because we've rejected every other one that's come this way. I don't have an answer for the township's problem of parking when we have lots that are this narrow, but I understand the applicant's issue, but this is a major zoning ordinance issue that if applied here, it would have to have some rules and regulations that don't exist in our current zoning ordinance. So I don't know where to go with this, and I don't even have a question to ask because I understand the problem, but I don't have a solution, and I know what's happened to every other one that's come before the board, and I'll leave it at that. I have nothing else to add.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? I wanted to be honest with the board, obviously, I don't know whether any of these were approved, but I think we've done the right thing by coming and asking for permission rather than perhaps doing what some of these other properties have done, which is just gone ahead and created front yard parking, which, has obviously been there and no one from the town has taken action to stop it. And the only other thing I would say, Mr. Fleischer, is, we're talking about a property here that it's impossible to provide any parking on the property. And the zoning ordinance requires a certain amount of parking spaces for each property. And this being a two-bedroom house, there's probably a requirement of 4 spaces in the zoning ordinance. Now, granted, the properties were developed probably before that ordinance took effect, but the reality is there's no parking that could be provided anywhere on this property, and which requires that the tenants find spaces somewhere else in a part of town which we all know is extremely congested and difficult to find parking anywhere. So, I mean, again, we think that it justifies granting a variance based upon the existing conditions, based upon the exceptionally small lot and the existing house that's on there, which you can't provide any parking anywhere. So.
I mean, on the other hand, it's existed for all this time. And my guess is it's been rented for a good deal of time along the way. And the question that's always come up is, are there available parking spots, parking permits, or other things within, 250, 300, 500 feet where they could rent a parking space and use the house? Because I can't justify this in light of anything else we've ever done, to the best of my knowledge, since I've been on the board, and that's been a long time. And I feel bad, and I've always asked the same question, but the response from the township has not been to make a modification or even a ruling that says where existing buildings exist and there's no other place to put parking, people should be allowed to park in front of their homes, and they haven't done that. And I just don't know the basis upon which I could approve it, fully understanding the hardship. So I happen to speak first, and I'll let others speak for themselves, but my goodness, we've been through this so many times, I don't have an answer for it.
Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
No questions per se, except to agree with Mr. Fleischer that there has never been, as far as I know, an approval of a front yard parking space because it was always forbidden around town. So I also would not know where to go with this one. I understand the problem in that part of town, but until some change is made and the ordinances change, I feel like I can't vote for this, regardless of the other buildings on the block, because we don't know how they got those parking spots approved or didn't get them approved. It just put them in. So right now, I have to agree with Mr. Fleischer that it's very difficult to vote in favor of this because in the past, when I was on the board previously, we used to deny these all the time. And I can't see any reason to not deny this one at this point.
Okay. Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. So the applicant is not proposing two, it's just one parking space at this point?
That's correct.
And the tree is scheduled to remain?
It's a utility
It's a
pole.
telephone pole.
It's a telephone pole, okay, so it has to stay. Regarding the driveway to the right in the picture, those cars, are those customer cars of the business next door? Or is that private, or you own private vehicles?
Those are our cars who work at D'Alessandro and Sons, the employees.
Employees or customers?
Employees. Customers' cars are kept inside.
All right, so are you concerned at all about potential damage to those cars parked adjacent to the proposed spot?
Well, North Willow Street during normal working hours, at 6 a.m., the commuters usually park there, and they're parked all the way down to South Willow. So there's never any parking across the street from the house. So that's another issue that we face. And one of the reasons why we wanted to come in front of the board and apply for this. I mean, now there seems to be few because of COVID and not too many people commuting into New York. But the Walnut Street train station is usually jam-packed. North Willow Street's packed, Walnut Street's packed. And it's just a common problem. I mean, we have rented it over the years, but it was difficult because the first thing people ask is, where do I park my car? And we try to work out things, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So we do lose a lot of renters because of that.
My question was about your employee cars. Were you concerned about damage to those with the proposed parking space?
No, not at all.
Okay, no other questions.
Okay. Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
I do. Where would the parking space go?
Could you repeat the question, Ms. Harris?
Where would the curb cut for the parking space go? You've got that utility pole kind of splitting the lot in the front, or the area in the front of the lot.
It would go to the right of the utility pole. I believe there's about 11 feet because the property line is actually 3 feet into the driveway there where the cars are parked. So I believe there's about 11 or 12 feet between the pole and the property line, which would allow for a curb cut.
Okay, and in the past, have you allowed residents to park in the business parking spaces in the evening or overnight?
Resident morning.
We have worked that out, but it depends on their jobs also. Those that work different hours that couldn't get in, that had to park during the day and worked at night, or those that worked at 7 o'clock till 6 o'clock, they were able to park there during the evening. But if they had to move their car early in the morning before we got there, and they slept till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, then that always created an issue. Because we're just jockeying cars around, leaving keys, and it just didn't work out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Caulfield, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I had the same question that Ms. Harris had, and the applicant answered, but I'm a bit concerned that we will be approving an application without actually seeing the dimensions on a drawing. We do have the property survey, but I can't tell from the picture what the distance will be, and I'm not sure if that will be right on the car's path. That's all.
Okay, I have a number of questions.
Mr. Harrison, I just wanted to mention Mr. Moore is here as well.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, and just for the record, he did arrive at 7:45 p.m. I made a note of it. It's kind of while we were assisting Mr. Tremblay, so apologies, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
I do. So I have a similar real estate development project I'm working on now that has a similar issue. Only difference is that behind the utility pole is the building has a it's to receive for trucks to pick up the garbage. Have you spoken to the township regarding them possibly moving the utility pole to another position so that this could be something possible?
Are you asking me that question or Alan?
Either or.
Oh.
Well,
No.
hold on, it's Mike Sullivan. The application was amended to provide, they're only seeking one parking space right now. They do not have to move the telephone pole to provide the one parking space.
It doesn't look like it would provide that much space. Yeah, doesn't look like it would be too safe with the utility pole being there. I see that I see how it's somewhat of a hardship to you as the homeowner, or using this as an investment property. But my concerns are similar with some of my other colleagues. I guess my question was answered.
I have a number of questions. I guess one of my, forgetting the fundamental issues I have with this, but I partially want to understand in terms of there being sufficient room, given that based on my understanding from the testimony is the existing driveway that's between two buildings is 3 feet onto the subject lot. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. I think that's shown on the survey.
Okay, so, and, based on the photos and based on what I saw in my own observation, it appears when there are cars parked in that driveway, they are very close to the house is how I'll describe that. And in turn, that would mean they're going to be very close. I'm trying to figure out if there's enough room between the telephone pole and where those cars are parked to actually fit a space and not have that car every time it goes in and out being at high risk of hitting the utility pole. So, do you have any sense of what that distance is between the curb of the driveway and where the telephone pole is?
Well, and Mr. Chairman, I can try to answer that because I looked at this and, obviously if the board were inclined to approve this, we would agree to provide a plan showing, dimensioning the parking space and the curb cut, et cetera. But in my view, I'm looking at, there are, I believe, two portions of the sidewalk. I think those are 4 feet wide, 2 sections of the sidewalk, plus the 3 feet on the right side of the curb there, which would allow for 11 feet.
Okay, but that 3 feet, I don't know that the parking that the commercial use is using now, if you took that 3 feet away from it, whether that works for that being able to be used as a driveway. I agree if you use that 3 feet for this, but then I think you're rendering the driveway for the business useless.
Well, but I think that the 3 feet would allow for the curb cut and for cars to get onto the property, and work around the telephone pole. But they would ultimately then park in the front of the house, not on the portion of the driveway that you're referring to. I think there's enough room for that. Again, I'd be happy to show that on a plan as the condition of approval if the board were so inclined.
Oh, I think before we approve it, we'd like to know it works. Let me go,
Okay.
In a number of other areas in town where there's similar narrow lots and lots that don't have on-site parking, the town has authorized overnight parking on those streets. Have you approached the town about doing that on this section of North Willow?
I have not, no.
And you indicated that commuters who are using North Willow for parking, is there any restrictions on the hour length? I mean, Walnut's limited because it's all parking meters that effectively precludes commuters parking there unless they like parking tickets. But are there any hour limits on the parking on the other side of North Willow here?
I know it's changed. It was 2 hours, but it might not be any restrictions at this time. I just don't remember.
Because I mean that if there were a 2-hour limit, that would effectively preclude New York commuters from parking there. My other question is, and it ties in again because of the angle. I can't quite tell how it lines up. Is there going to be enough room between the side of the porch to allow a car to pull all the way forward so it would not be on the sidewalk or extending out over the sidewalk?
Yes, there would be, yes.
I mean, you have the dimension of 22.97 feet, which would be enough. Just in terms of how far out the porch extends, that distance is what I'm trying to figure out, so they could be able to pull by the porch. And then my other question is, there are you showed pictures of a few houses on North Willow that have front yard parking, but aren't there several houses also that do not have front yard parking?
The question is, are there houses on North Willow that do not have front yard parking?
Yes.
Yeah, there's houses that don't have front yard parking. But also, I just want to point out, I was trying to remember the name of the street, but where the old inspection station used to be, that's now the bread company. 2 streets up going towards Chestnut. One of those side streets there, I forget the name of it, but the whole block is front yard parking.
Right, you have, and I get one of those is Oak and one is Sylvan, and right, the one is virtually all front yard parking, and the other street, the one-way street is all front yard parking, and the two-way street is, virtually no front yard parking. And I guess my reaction, since you brought it up, is the one with all the front yard parking really looks less than desirable. I don't know how that evolved. That's been that way for as long as I can remember, but it's not sure that's a look that's what we want to do. But going back to what Mr. Fleischer said, I mean, I view this as an ordinance change. I mean, this is a situation we've confronted, many times since I've been on the board, and and just driving around town, there are many more situations where people haven't applied where the same situation exists. And what I'm not hearing is anything that's particular about this lot versus the, what is literally hundreds of other lots in town that are similarly narrow with no access to the rear to provide conforming parking. Okay. Mr. Tremblay, do you have any further questions for Mr. D'Alessandro, or anything further you want to add before we discuss and vote on the app? Oh, first I'll open it up to the public. First, do you have anything further from Mr. D'Alessandro?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Can I ask a question? Because unfortunately, I just got back into town today and did not get over to the site. That paved driveway, could it continue back further? Or is the building blocking it?
No, the building blocks it. It ends towards the end.
So that's where the building
is.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not clear in the photo, and that's why I asked the question.
Okay.
That ends my option.
I just want to add one thing, though. When Alan and I were talking about the telephone pole, on my way home today, there's plenty of telephone poles and plenty of utility poles and trees right next to driveways of homes. So that's why I didn't think that would be an issue. So if you look, just drive around town, you look at the telephone poles and utility poles and trees, they're planted right next to the aprons of a lot of houses and driveways. So that's why I didn't think that would be an issue of someone hitting the pole.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who either have questions about this application, testimony, comments, anything you want to say about the application? We'll now open the microphone so you'll have an opportunity to say whatever you want to say.
Okay, so all members of the public, I'll be unmuting all lines. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question on this application, please state your name, and then I will bring you into the meeting to ask your question or make your comment. Okay, all lines are now unmuted. If you have a question or a comment on this application, please state your name.
Good evening. My name is Frank Rubacki.
Okay, hang on one second, Mr. Rubacki. Okay, Mr. Rubacki, can you hear us?
Yes.
Mr. Rubacki, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
Frank Rubacki, Upper Mountain Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
What number Upper Mountain Avenue, Mr. Rubacki?
Oh, I'm sorry, 398.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, first, I have a question, and then I have comments. Should I do them together?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, if it's possible, I don't think it's possible to fit a car perpendicular to the street based on the survey and have the porch. But my question really is, can you share the driveway if you could get the owner to agree to park parallel to the street? That's a question for the applicant.
Oh, we have tried to do that. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Like I said before, it depends on the renter's working hours. If they're working, if they're not working, 9 to 5, then it does not work out.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. If it's a single spot that's being requested, then what difference does it make what the working hours are?
Well, if we get there at 7:30 in the morning, so if someone's parked there, if a renter's parked there, they have to move their car by 7:30. But if they don't go to work until noon, then their car's not being moved until 11 o'clock, an hour before they have to go to work. If they have to leave at 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there's no possibility of an easement or an agreement to share the driveway, even though the property survey extends 3 feet into the driveway.
Yeah, no, like I said, yeah, we have done that before, and if the working hours work out, then we are able to work it out where they get back at 6 and we're gone already. But if they have strange working hours, and that just limits to the renters that we get.
Yes, okay. The other thing I would just simply say is comment on some of the zoning board comments. That it seems to be the focus is on small width parcels that can't provide for rear parking. And that's the problem with the illegal situation in town. And I think that's just totally not accurate. If anything, there's a double standard in which the township facilitates or allows front yard parking in areas that have more than enough capacity and actively restricts smaller lots, lower income, middle income lots from having that parking. I'll give you an example. It's not too hard to see. I know you're mostly familiar with the town. But if you drive on Upper Mountain from Alpine to Bellevue, those lots are in the RO zone. They're 150 feet wide minimum lot width, 150 feet. And if you go, there are 45 lots. And if you go drive down that street on the east side, 1 out of every 7, actually it's more, but 1 out of every 7 has front yard parking. And it's just not like technical violations. This is front yard parking that is contiguous to the right of way or intrudes in the right of way. And is, it's not like it's set back 30 feet or 30 feet down or whatever it is. This is just blatant. We're going to allow it in the affluent areas, either through lack of enforcement or because of the permit process. But we're not going to allow it in the less affluent areas. And if that's a problem for the zoning board, that's a problem for the zoning board. But don't say it's because it's a restriction of lot size, okay? And whether you're approving it is immaterial in a way because other people are approving it. I made this point before about 9 Upper Mountain. You didn't approve that. But there were permits issued by the building department that did approve it. And they have front yard parking. And no one's going to enforce that. So, get the story straight if you're going to sell it. And deny the application, fine. Whatever you want to do, deny the application. But this is going to be an issue. And it's an issue of equity. And you guys have done it before. You did it before on Orange Road. And it's always about equity. Anyway, that's my point. And lastly, I would just say that, Graham, you will be sorely missed. I'm sorry to hear you're leaving. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who have any comments or questions concerning the application?
All members of the public, once again, I'll be unmuting all lines. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question on this application, please state your name. Once again, we're accepting any questions or comments on this application at this time. If you would like to make one, please state your name. Mr. Chair. I'm not hearing any other briefs for question.
Okay, Mr. Trembulac, you have anything further you want to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to put this in the context of, what we have to prove to justify the variance and obviously the board's well familiar with these standards, but, I think the application can be approved either under C1 or C2 criteria. It's obviously a significantly undersized lot with an existing building which takes up virtually the entire width of the lot. I would think, I don't know for sure, but I think that the minimum lot size requirement on this block is, it's a 6-foot lot width requirement on the street, and we're less than half the width of that. It's a significantly undersized lot, and I think, with no ability whatsoever to provide any legal parking spaces on the property. And so I think that would allow for, provides a basis to prove this under C1. With respect to C2, there's obviously a benefit not only to the property, but to the community by allowing a parking space on this property. We all know that parking is at a premium in this area. If people can't park on their properties, they have to try to find parking either in public lots or elsewhere in the town. So there's obviously a benefit. As far as the negative criteria with the detriment, and in terms of any detrimental impact there, the property is at the very edge of the R2 zone. You have next to it, you have the D'Alessandro Brothers Auto Repair, and everything to the north on that side of the street is C2 zoning. Across the street, you have the animal shelter, the former Lombardi yard, which has been unoccupied, commercial uses. Certainly, there's no impact whatsoever to those properties. And in terms of the residential properties that would be affected by this, there are only two, which, well, the adjacent property as well as the one next to that, both have similar conditions on their property, whether they're legal or not. They have front yard parking. So allowing a front yard parking space on this property you can't say would have a detrimental impact on those adjacent residential properties, nor on any of the commercial properties located in the C2 zone. So I think for those reasons, there's a justifiable basis for the board to grant the request to allow us to have one on-site parking space. And as I said before, we would be happy to come back with a fully, dimensioned plan showing how that would work if the board were inclined to grant the variance. So thank you for your time, and I apologize again for my video connection problems, which continue to exist.
Okay, we'll start
Thank you.
discussion with Mr. Moore.
This is a tricky application. On one hand, I recognize that it is somewhat of a hardship not being able to rent your property and have parking with that. I recognize that it affects the rental amount. But on the other hand, I also recognize that from a safety standpoint, seeing how close the utility pole is, so whenever I look at projects, I look at health and safety first. And it's hard for me to approve this project, although I would like to, but because I get it in terms of being able to park in the front yard and that being consistent with the neighbors. Although, I would like to, I would say that I'm not in favor of it only because of the awkwardness of this utility pole and how much limited space you would have to be able to pull in and out of the driveway for any reason, or if you have to rush the car out and you hit that and it may cause more damage. So I'm not in favor of the application.
Okay, Mr. Church.
Go ahead,
My,
Mr. Hirsch. Now you're on.
okay, I am sympathetic to the owner of the property, and when I sat on the parking authority, these problems used to come to us too on that authority, because landlords always had a problem if they didn't have a place for their tenants to park and came to us for relief. We couldn't give them the relief they wanted in a lot of cases because of the ordinance that says you can't park in front of a property. So with that in mind, and with my previous comments, I cannot approve this unless I see a change in the ordinances that says we allow it now in circumstances such as this. So I have to vote no.
Mr. McCullough?
What about all those houses in it for now?
Well, I think much like my colleagues, I've been wrestling back and forth in terms of listening to the arguments in favor of and opposition to. While there's a part of me that acknowledges that there is somewhat of a precedent in the neighborhood because there already are existing lots with parking in the front of the property. That doesn't extend to all of the property. So clearly there are those that do not, and this is one. I'm not much of a fan of front yard parking anyway, but that's beside the point. When I'm looking at the photo of the property, acknowledging that at some point there was new curbing that was placed in front of the property, as well as I think between the business and the house. I'm wondering why perhaps this wasn't considered at that time when those projects were being undertaken. What's the difference between that time and now? So I struggle with this one. My lean is to vote no on this one. It's one that I'm really struggling with.
Okay, Mr. Simon?
Without even considering the historical issues with parking in the front, this property would be very difficult to approve just for the utility pole alone, and as well as the parking. But as I was listening, I don't know if it's too late to ask questions, but considering that this is a rental property and income is the priority, has there been any consideration of allowing that driveway to be dedicated to the property and make the employees deal with parking elsewhere? Since if it's really an issue of income and revenue, then that's an option that could be explored as well. Again, with a benefit to your loss to your employees, but there are options here, and this property is challenging in and of itself outside of the historical precedents. So I would not be in favor of this.
Ms. Harris?
I would agree with Mr. Simon's point about looking at options. In addition, I live on a street with multifamily homes with no parking on the property, and we did petition the parking authority to get permit parking on the street, and we were successful. And so I think there are other options besides this for safety reasons, as well as just aesthetically. I don't know how those other properties have front yard parking the way that they do. I think, we need to do a better job in Montclair of enforcing our ordinance. But I don't think we should continue to set this precedent here. I would not be in favor of this application.
Mr. Caulfield?
I'm going to agree with my colleagues and echo what they have said. I'm not in favor of this project at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to echo my colleagues' comments. although I understand the hardship for the applicant, it's very difficult to move forward with this application, especially having the utility pole there. I think safety it's a concern for me, so I will not be in favor also. Thank you.
Mr. Fleischer?
I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. I really do find this to be a tough issue, and I think the chairman had it right that this is an administrative thing. There are opportunities to, shall I say, petition the municipality for overnight parking. There are opportunities to go to the municipal council and get time limits for parking on the opposite side of the street that would then make it impossible for those who are going into the city or anything on buses or trains and commuting to park there all day. I think this is an administrative responsibility of the township. I happen to think it's a responsibility at the council level, but absent that, it's an administrative responsibility where other people and other communities have been successful in setting up for overnight parking permits on the street, as well as for setting time limits where commuters can't park for the day. So I can't make a change as basic as this, given the long history of these decisions, and suddenly set a new precedent today when we've been faced with this exact same issue for a long time. So I think the applicant should seek those alternative administrative options. As I think was pointed out, maybe there's some advantage here on this particular rental property because of the relationship between the owner of the property and the owner of the commercial facility next door, but they don't need anybody's permission to make those arrangements. So, and not everybody has that option. I would bet dollars to donuts that any one of those spaces we were shown as existing on the street were never legally permitted or approved, and they were just done. I don't think that's a good precedent either, but I don't see where we could approve it. So I would not be in favor of the application.
Okay. I am also not in favor of the application. I think there are, as has been indicated, I mean, we have pretty consistently denied these regardless of where located in town. There have been a couple where the circumstances are truly unique, but you know, the circumstances of this lot are all too typical in town, and the township has adopted as its solution to allow on certain streets overnight parking. I think, you know, in a number of applications we have denied, that has been the result and subsequently on those streets. So I think that's where the township has decided to go. It has decided not to change the ordinance to permit front yard parking, and it has decided to allow overnight parking on streets where there's a difficulty providing enough on-site parking. And I don't have a basis on the facts presented, and this has some particular difficulties, and we've not been shown dimensions as to show a parking space works consistent with the utility pole and the driveway that partially uses this lot on the adjacent lot that's being used by the adjacent lot. So I would not be in favor. Would someone like to make a motion?
Move approval, move to deny the application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Graham, you want to call the roll?
Yeah, just prior to calling the roll, I just want to note for the record, we do have 9 members in attendance this evening. So Mr. Vieira and Mr. Caulfield, our 2 alternate members, will not be recorded on the vote. Okay, Ms. Harris?
A yes vote is to deny the application, just so all the board members are clear.
Yeah.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
Mr. Fleischer?
Yes.
And Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Okay. The application is denied.
The next application is that of Victoria and Deborah Belenkina for property at 30 New Street. This is an application for a variance to construct additions to the existing dwelling. The property is in the R2 two-family zone. Property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 2 and Block 3,110. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45B1 to permit a minimum front yard setback of less than the required 25 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C1 to permit a minimum side yard setback of less than the required 6 feet from one side and 10 feet on the other. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C4 to permit a maximum building width of greater than 65% of the width of the lot. Variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45E to permit a maximum building coverage of greater than 25% of the lot. Are taxes paid? Is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay, is the applicant here?
Yes, we have Deborah Belenkina and the architect Javier Fuentes are both here. Mr. Fuentes, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi, how are you?
Good. And Ms. Belenkina, can you hear us? Oh,
Yes, I can hear you.
okay, great.
Okay, I'm going to swear both of you in. Would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes,
Yes.
I do.
Will the applicant please give us your name and address first?
Deborah Belenkina, 30 New Street.
Mr. Fuentes, would you please give us your full name and address?
Yes, Javier Enrique Fuentes Jr., and the address is 612 Galloping Hill Road, Roselle Park, New Jersey.
Mr. Fuentes, are you the architect on this project?
I am.
Okay, you are a registered architect of the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes, that's
And your
correct.
license is in good standing?
Yes.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you so much. First, I just want to say, Graham, thank you so much for helping us through this process. It was really helpful. Thank you, board members, and thank you to the people of Montclair. So this is 30 New Street in Montclair, New Jersey, very close to the Glenfield Community Park. And so the applicant has a two-family home, and the second floor has a very low ceiling height due to the condition of the construction of the home. So what the applicant is doing is taking a very modest approach in the design to create an addition to be able to bring the walls higher on the second floor to be able to have a much more habitable and comfortable space for the future tenant of this space, as well as altering the interior layout to create a much more efficient space for both first and second floor. Sorry, and so to explain, so the lot is also on a undersized lot size. It's 29 feet wide by 80 feet in depth, while the required is 60 by 110. So that does fall into some issues with the side yard setback and the front yard setback, in which due to the undersized lot, it hinders and falls within the setback lines for that reason. So we are requesting a variance for the side yard and as well as the front yard for this condition.
Do you want to explain how the added space will be utilized?
Sure. Yeah. So on the second floor, we're adding, we are altering the layout so that it is now going to have the living dining room and the kitchen in the front portion of the house. So it'll create a much more comfortable space, as well as we're altering the location of the bathroom. And then the back portion of the house where the bedrooms will be is actually in the existing portion of the house that is not going to be touched. So you can sort of tell, right, there's like two halves of this. So the front half of it is the portion that we're altering, and that's just to be able to increase the height and be able to expand and utilize the space, because At the ends of the home, the ceiling height goes as low as 3.5, almost 4 feet. So it's very uncomfortable walking around. So this is really an approach, a very simple approach to try to create a much more comfortable space to use.
Okay. Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
Is he muted, Graham?
He is muted. I don't know. Mr. Moore, are you there? I can't unmute him. Sure.
I'll come back to him. Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
Yeah, this is currently a one-family home, and it's going to be a two-family?
Oh, no. So it's a 2-family, and it's going to stay as a 2-family.
It's a two-family today.
Yeah.
No other questions.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
Yes. So what's the resulting height on each floor to floor?
So the floor to floor, let me just get that to you here. So yeah, so 7'4" from the first floor to the second floor, and then the second floor, well, it's just the ceiling space there for 7'6". And
Okay,
so the roof height goes up a little bit, just a little bit, so that we were able to create a 4-on-12 pitch for the roof.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield, do you have any questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Is Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
Sorry about that. I was having technical difficulty. I have no questions.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Are there any members of the public who either have questions concerning the application or any statements, testimony, comments, anything you want to say about the application? Now is your opportunity. We will unmute your microphone so you can indicate you want to make some comments or ask questions.
Okay. All members of the public, I'll be unmuting your lines at this time for questions and comments. Please state your name, and then I'll bring you into the meeting to ask your question or make your comment. All lines are now unmuted. Please state your name if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment.
Temporarily, I took the metal part, the wheels, and I put it in the top shelf.
Once again, we're taking any public questions or comments.
That's fine. Tomorrow.
Okay, that's good, so it's away.
It's away.
Please state your name if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Hey, Mr. Chairman, I'm not hearing any requests for questions or comments.
Okay. Is there anything either of you want to add before we discuss and vote on the application? This is your last chance to say something before we decide the application.
That's for Mr. Fuentes and Ms. Belenkina.
Mr. Fuentes, Mr. Belenkina, do you have anything further?
Oh, that's all.
No, that's
Thank
it.
you so much for this opportunity.
Okay, we'll start discussion with Mr. Church.
Yes, hello?
We can hear you. Yep, you're good.
Yes.
Okay, I would be in favor of this application. I don't think that it's a detriment to the area or a detriment to the overall design of the master plan. I think that what we've approved in the past is construction similar to this. Therefore, I would have no problem approving this, so I would vote in favor of it.
Okay, Mr. McCullough,
I'm also in favor of the application.
okay, Mr. Simon,
I'm in favor.
Ms. Harris,
I'm in favor. I think making very modest changes to the envelope of the building that shouldn't affect the adjacent properties or the public good at all.
okay, Mr. Caulfield,
I'm in favor. I think the applicants did a great job at this. It's going to look really great in the area, so I'm in favor. Thank you.
okay, Mr. Vieira,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this application is pretty straightforward, so I'm also in favor of the application.
okay, Mr. Fleischer,
Yeah, I do have one comment. Greg, can you go back to the sections?
Sure.
I mean, not to bother anybody. I'm in favor of the application. Can you blow up the section? Because I think what people are missing is literally the ceiling height on the first floor is only 6'7". And even on the second floor, 7'6". If I had any comment to make, I'd say I wish the whole house could be expanded further vertically to actually provide for some decent heights. But I assume economically that's not feasible for the applicant, and so I'm certainly going to approve it. But when we talk about some of the things in town and some of the older housing, to live in a home with 6'7" ceilings is pretty tough. And I just felt the need to comment on it. And even the 7'6" that you eventually get on the second floor is not that great. So I'm certainly in favor of the application. I wish, in fact, they could do more utilizing the footprint, but I wish they could have done more. But I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. Moore,
I'm sorry, I do have a question. I thought the first floor ceiling height was 7'4". Is it in fact 6'7"?
Yes, when you had asked the question, you had asked if it was the floor-to-floor height. So I apologize if I misunderstood. So yes, it's just the existing condition and the economical aspect of it to raise the rest of the home is a little bit complex. So we've tried to take an approach that we could in being able to alter just the second floor to create a better ceiling height.
Okay, thank you.
okay, Mr. Moore,
I'm in favor of the application.
I'm also in favor of the application. I think this is very modest additions. It's not creating any new encroachments on any of the setbacks. It's good to have having dealt with many non-homeowners in the area coming in with improvements to the property, it's good to have a homeowner come in and do improvements to the property. This is not going to result in a substantial detriment to the public good or a substantial impairment to the zone plan, and the applicants to amend it, in my view. Someone want to make a motion?
Move approval of the application as submitted.
Is there a second? Okay, let's do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, go do your addition.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next application is that of Lauren and Martin Bristow, owners of property at 46 Llewellyn Road. This is an application to construct a new detached garage on the rear of the existing dwelling. Property is in the RO Mountainside Zone District. The property is designated on the township tax map as lot 38, block 2101. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-34A2 to permit a minimum side yard setback for accessory structures on corner lots with less than the required 55 feet from the adjacent side street. Are taxes paid and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay, welcome the applicant back. Sorry you had to come back. I guess, but maybe you liked it so much you decided to come back another time, but sorry for the circumstances that led you to come back.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
Lauren Bristow, 46 Llewellyn Road, Montclair, New Jersey.
And Norton Bristow, same address.
Okay, you want to explain what you're proposing to do now that the other garage collapsed or whatever?
Yes, absolutely. So that is the bird's eye view of where the garage was previously. And we had to demolish that garage because in the time since our previous application had been approved by the board, there was significant structural damage to that structure, including multiple trees falling on it. There were holes in the roof. There were cracks in all four walls of the structure. And as we continued with the bidding process with 7 different contractors, every single one of them said there's no part of that structure that can be saved. So that's when we sort of had to shift gears and came upon the realization of the guidelines of our previous approval were a little bit different than we thought. So we are in front of you today to reapply. We are intending to build the same size structure in the same spot that was previously approved. The only thing that changed is what we were planning on constructing it out of, but everything else is the same as was previously approved. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, Mr. Harrison, you're on mute, so go ahead. I just unmuted you, so you're good.
Okay. Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
Yeah, can we go back to the site plan? I mean, obviously, one of the reasons one approves these things has to do with the issue of the existing structure. Now the structure isn't there. From my perspective, given the nature of Curtis Terrace, this is not a big issue even under these circumstances. But I will at least ask the question of, since the structure is no longer there, and presumably the foundation, could it be moved further to the, I guess it's the east, to get it a little bit further away from Curtis Terrace?
Yeah, well, I mean, as it stands today, I'm assuming that was a question to me. As it stands today, the footings of that structure are actually still in the ground because our intent all along has been to try and rebuild in the same spot, just based on the layout of the backyard. It's a little bit more long and narrow than it is wide. So that has been our design intent from the beginning, yes.
So the footings of the original garage are still in place, and you're building on that foundation. Thank you.
I mean, we would like to, yes. Our contractor believes that that might be possible, but he has not, after we demolished the garage, he left those in the ground just on the hopes that we can still use those, yes.
Well, what I'm hoping is you don't come back a third time. So I'm hoping the foundations work, because we have to come back a third time, and even the foundations don't work, then I have other questions. But I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
We hope not to trouble you a third time with this project.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
Is he muted, Graham?
He is, yeah, I'm not sure. Can't unmute him, so. Mr. Moore, can you hear us?
Okay, we'll come back to him. Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
Yeah,
You're unmuted, Mr. Church. You're good.
okay. I would just, I wonder if the material you're going to use is going to be still stucco.
No, it is not. We moved away from that.
Okay, so it's not gonna mimic the house.
It is on the, like, as far as the interior construction, no.
What do you mean? I mean on the outside, the stucco.
No,
It won't
correct.
mimic the house. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. What material are you going to use?
It's going to be wood at this point.
Wood. Go.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Caulfield, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. When you were before you were going to put an addition on the garage, are you still planning to build a larger garage than what you had, or you're
No.
just staying on the same footprint as the existing garage?
Correct. We are staying on the same footprint as the previous existing garage.
And your access to Curtis Terrace will be in the same location you had proposed before, basically lining up straight with the garage?
It's going to come, like, if you're looking at that bird's eye view, it kind of comes out to the left a little bit from, the garage doors will be facing the back of the property. So, and then it'll come out on Curtis Terrace toward the back of Curtis
Yeah.
Terrace on our side of the property.
Okay,
Yep.
but my recollection is that's about where you were proposing
Yes,
before.
correct.
Okay.
It has not changed.
Okay, and then my other question is, when you were here before, you were indicating that some of the existing driveway was going to be removed. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Okay, so where will you be removing that?
So it's removed by about to where the back property line of the house is. Yeah, correct.
So basically the rear yard portion of the driveway will be removed. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay, are there any members of the public who have questions, statements, testimony, any comments whatsoever about the application?
Okay, all members of the public will be unmuting your lines at this time. If you have any questions or comments on this application, please state your name and we'll bring you into the meeting to make those questions or comments. All lines are now unmuted. Please state your name if you have a question or a comment. Once again, the board is accepting questions or comments on this application for 46 Llewellyn. Please state your name if you have any questions or comments. Mr. Chairman, I'm not receiving any inquiries for questions or comments at this time.
Okay, Mr. or Ms. Bristow, anything further you want to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
No, I think that is everything. Thank you for taking our application again.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll start this discussion with Mr. McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready to approve this application.
Okay, Mr. Simon,
I'm in favor.
Ms. Harris,
Favor.
Mr. Caulfield,
I'm in favor too.
Mr. Vieira,
I'm also in favor of the application.
Mr. Fleischer.
I'm in favor of the application, but I would like a condition on there that it's based on using the existing foundations, because once that goes away as well, it's a whole different story. This is change orientation. It's added additional paving in the drive. It's taken away paving, but it's added additional paving to the garage, and it's totally changed the orientation. So as long as the condition is that it remains on the existing foundations, I have no problem approving this as submitted.
Okay, Mr. Moore,
I'm in favor with the application.
Mr. Church?
I'm in favor of the application.
Okay, I'm also in favor of the application. I think, you know, given the circumstances of the lot, given the fact that Curtis Terrace is a private road, given the applicant's statement that they will remove the rear portion of the driveway, I do agree with Mr. Fleischer that this is based on them using the existing foundation with the existing footprint of the garage. So I would propose two conditions. One, that they that they require to use the existing footing or foundation at the same, obviously the same location, and that the portion of the driveway that's behind the existing house be removed. Any further discussion? If not, would someone like to move the application?
Move approval of the application with the conditions as stated by the chair.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, go try again and hopefully we'll not see you again.
Thank you for your time.
But
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, it's Michael Sullivan. I did get a message from Alan Trembulak. He would like to address the board with regard to application 2747268 North Mountain Avenue, Diane Russell.
And, okay. Sure. I mean, I was gonna do, is he, okay, I'll assume this is will be productive to hear him, so.
Yes.
Okay,
I wouldn't
I'll bring
suggest
this
it
to-
otherwise.
Okay, Mr. Tremblay, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
I'm going to actually start my video, hopefully. I was able to finally connect. There we go. Mr. Chairman, I'm representing the applicant on 268 North Mountain Avenue. I've only been involved in this application for about a week. I was asked to substitute for another attorney. And I'd like to request at this time that the application be postponed for several reasons. You know, as I was reviewing the plans earlier in preparation, I realized that number one, there's some errors in the plans that I think are significant, need to be corrected. Number two, I have some thoughts I want or suggestions I'd like to discuss with my client about plan revisions that I think could either eliminate or certainly reduce some of the variances that are being requested. Number three, I know there's some public interest in this application, and I've heard about some of the issues that neighbors are concerned about, one being drainage. And I can tell the board my client has already engaged Paul Anderson, a professional engineer, to provide a grading and drainage plan, which obviously is not complete, but will be before the next meeting. So I think, you know, for all of those reasons, I would ask that the application be adjourned and I guess rescheduled for your September meeting.
Okay, and would you be doing new notice or?
Yeah,
No.
I would, ask that be adjourned without further notice being required.
Okay. And where do we need an extension of time to act on the application?
Let me just take a look. Give me one.
And Graham, what date is that meeting?
The September meeting, the date of that meeting is September 22nd.
So Chairman, the applicant certainly consents to an extension of time if it's needed for the application.
Okay, and you'll make sure that whatever revised plans and submissions are to the board, but you know, so they can post it on the website 10 days in advance of the 22nd.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
The action date is October 18th, so there is sufficient time.
Okay. So the application by Diane Russell for property at 268 North Mountain Avenue is being continued until our meeting on September 22nd. There will be no further public notice. The revised materials that will be provided by the application will be available on the township's website at least 10 days in advance of September 22nd. If they are not available at that point, Mr. Trembulac, we will then require new notice and proceed accordingly. But for members of the public, assume this will be heard on September 22nd, and by September 12th, you'll be able to look at the revised submission and be prepared. And I would encourage everyone to talk to each other and see if you can resolve at least some issues, not for the board, and answer questions that the neighbors have concerning the application. Would be productive. Have your engineer be available so he can explain how the drainage system will be working. Okay, but there'll be no further public notice in this matter for the application of Diane Russell is being continued to our meeting on September 22nd. Will be another virtual hearing, I'm afraid.
And that's also 7:30 p.m.
Yes. And information on connecting to the meeting will be posted on the board's agenda page and also as part of the notice that's posted at the municipal building. You can also reach out to the planning department, 973-509-4954 to obtain any information and also see the plans.
Okay. The next application is that of Thomas Truxillo for property at 117 Gordonhurst Avenue. This is an application for a variance to construct additions to the existing dwelling. The property is in the R1 one-family zone. Property is designated on the township tax maps as lot 57 and block 3502. A variance is requested from Montclair Code section 347-45C4 to permit a maximum building width of greater than 65 feet, 65% of the width of the lot. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes, and before we get started, I think Mr. Caulfield.
Yep, that's me. I'm out. Thank you, Bram.
Excuse
myself. Thank you.
We have Mr. Kopek, the architect, and Mr. Truxillo are both here for the application.
Okay, would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
Yes. Let's start with the applicant first. Would you just give us your name and address, please?
Thomas Truxillo, 117 Gordonhurst Avenue.
Okay, and then is it Mr. Kopek, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Daniel Kopek.
And just give us your full name and address, please.
Sure. Daniel Kopek, 289 Bay Avenue, Glenridge.
And Mr. Kopek, you are a registered architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
That is correct.
And your license is in good standing?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Proceed and explain what you're proposing.
Sure. My firm was engaged by the Truxillos to explore an addition to their residence. In that exploration, we looked at options to expand the building laterally to the side, to the east, and also to the rear, to the north of the property. It was ultimately determined that the most successful means to expand the property would be to the east. And so in order to make an addition of adequate size for the program, we proposed expanding the building 13 feet 3 inches of interior space to the east of the existing structure. This addition respects the municipal front, side, and rear yard setbacks, the overall bulk coverage. I know that Mr. Peto's zoomed in on the site plan here. We do have the ordinances on this sheet as well. The Montclair Historical Preservation Commission has also deemed the proposed addition to be respectful of the existing building and in proportion to the existing home. I also believe that the addition works well into the rhythm of the block. all of the other buildings on that side of Gordonhurst have a side addition, and the rhythm of built space to open space is uniform. This property, without that extra width, has a rather considerable open space between it and the neighbor to the east, and so ultimately I think this ends up being fairly uniform. As was mentioned at the outset, the issue is the impact to that ordinance 347.45C4, which is that when constructed, the overall width of the building slightly exceeds that 65% of the lot, as shown in that portion shaded in red. I believe the hardship results from the porch on this property, and if you see on the west side, the existing front porch actually encroaches on the 6-foot side yard setback and projects beyond the primary western facade of the building by about 20 inches. And so we're seeking 18 inches of width to the east. And so overall, we exceed that 65% lot width. But in reality, where the addition would be relative to the primary western facade of the building, we would be under the overall 65% of lot width. I think that's all in terms of explanation of the project.
Go ahead, Mr. Harris. I didn't know if you were speaking.
Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
I guess the basic question is, could it not be made 18 inches narrower? And the 5.69 is essentially right on the property line, give or take 3 inches. So the question is, could the addition be made somewhat narrower to more closely conform? That's the only question I really have.
Right, and we obviously explored that because, you know, I would want to be in conformity wherever possible. It was just determined that the program that was established for the project, particularly in order to get an adequate sized bedroom on the second floor, there was no way to do it within the within conformity.
Let me just follow up on that for a moment. How much are you out in total, not counting the opposite side where the porch intrudes?
If we were to not,
so that would be what, 15 inches or so, or instead of the 18? Is that what we're talking about?
No, I think we would be within conformity by 2 inches.
Not the entire porch, just the part that is inside the yard.
I'm sorry, I'm not. You know, yeah.
There's a dimension there, 569.
Correct.
That's the only. So if that were the only violation, and if we said that was an existing condition, that takes care of
A few inches. Correct.
3 feet, so roughly 4 or 5 inches, or 4 inches, for argument's sake, in which case you would then have to shorten the dimension of the 13-foot 3 down to about 12 foot. And you're saying that doesn't work?
That doesn't work, correct.
Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm not clear why that small reduction wouldn't work. What are you losing that you couldn't? What would not fit by reducing it by those few inches?
Which are we talking about, reducing it by the 18 inches in order to get into conformity, or the 3 or 4 inches that Mr. Fleischer is suggesting given the existing condition on the west side of the property?
No, if I'm looking in the area on the right, if I'm understanding this correctly, the 12 right now is 12'3".
Correct.
So what is it about the design where you couldn't pull from that? Am I looking at this correctly? Where that's the side which you're expanding?
That is correct.
So what would, by reducing it by, say, of the 18 inches, what doesn't fit anymore? Because that still seems to be a pretty decent sized room.
Well, and so that 12-foot, that roughly 12'4", that's there would be an exterior dimension. So once we account for a wall there, we're 11'9", let's say. It becomes it did not meet the requirements of the program that my clients gave to me for that master suite.
Yeah, I think this is the homeowner. Thanks, Dan. I think the point is that we are trying to make that into our master bedroom, and for in order to fit a bed and be able to get to either side of it, it's extremely tight at 11 feet. Right?
I'm not sure I understood that because I'm looking at the plan and it shows the bed not in that direction. It shows the bed against what I'll call the wall of the existing structure. So.
And to walk through to be able to access the other side of the bed. Right?
Yeah, what's not shown in there is at the foot of the bed there's a dresser, and once the dresser is in, if we lose that 18 inches in order to be in conformity, there's not sufficient space to navigate around the bed.
Is saying the dresser, how big is that gap between the, I'm sorry, I should go, Mr. Simon, go back to you. You follow up. I had my turn, I'm sorry.
I will cede my time to Mr. Fleischer.
At one level, it's a de minimis request. At another level, the question is, the dresser can't be wider than the closet, if that's a normal closet. And the gap between the closet and the wall of the stair is certainly enough for passage around the bed. So I'm just not understanding the option. Obviously, if you move the closet would also move over, but I guess my question is, how wide is that slot between the closet and the stairway wall?
And Dan, the impact on the master bathroom as well, right? Being able to, I mean,
well, sure. I think all of it starts to shrink. I think that ultimately, the room is successfully proportioned as presently drawn. If we were to reduce it by 18 inches, is it technically passable? Yes. I think that does it function in the way my clients have asked me to prepare it? No. And so, I do think it's somewhat de minimis, and I also think that the issue is frankly that front porch, and so that if we were to look at the 65% of width to the primary bulk of the home, we are in conformity, and I think that I don't want to have to propose this, although my clients were talking about it, about potentially lobbing off a portion of that porch in order to make the property conform, because that's less valuable to them than gaining the space on the east side of the home.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman and board members, if I could just help with some clarification of what the ordinance language stipulates. If I could just read this section of the ordinance, it's 347-45C4. maximum permitted width of a principal structure shall be 65% of the width of the lot frontages at any one point measured parallel to the street line. And then subsection A, which is applicable here, says for building additions which widen the existing principal structure, the maximum permitted width shall apply to the width of the expanded structure, including the addition. And we've seen this in similar applications when, we've reviewed these administratively in the office. So the portion of the building that does exceed the 65% is just forward of this line. I'm sorry, that's a really terribly drawn line. Let me use the straight line. Just forward of this portion. I believe, Mr. Kopech, and you'll probably have a better sense of dimensioning, but, I think that the extent of the variance relief that's being sought is just this front portion. I think given the jog in the building, this portion may actually be within that conformity. I'm not sure.
That portion is entirely within, correct,
Right.
correct. And so my thinking was that we are also, you can see the dashed line there that says 10-foot side yard setback, and we are at the closest 14.83 feet to the east side yard. That it made sense from a design standpoint, in full recognition that this is in one of the historic districts in town, to extend the porch across the front of the property in a way that makes it function aesthetically, that we end up with this this non-conformity with regards to this ordinance.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for the board. So,
thank you.
So it's just the area that you have circled that goes over the limit instead of the entire red portion?
yeah, that's correct. The portion as it goes rearward is less than 65% of the width of the lot. So really, the extent of the variance relief where it exceeds the 65% is just this section of the dwelling.
Not sure of the interpretation.
I'll come to that, but let's cycle through. Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
No, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Joe, Mr. Fleischer, why don't you go before I go? I think, Graham, we need a better understanding of what you're measuring to and from for the calculating the 65% and what is and isn't in conformity.
My sense was that the 65% had to be from the furthest to one side to the furthest to the other side, not a little bit in the front and a little bit in the back. And so I don't think that, I'm surprised by the interpretation. As I said, at another level, this is quite de minimis in general, and I understand that. I was seeking some minor adjustment just to make it a little bit less, because that porch, under the way the regulations are written, counts as part of the width of the house. And when you add up that line all the way to the other line, in essence, the entire red zone is technically outside of the 65%. Again, it's within the context of the site and everything else, it's relatively small. And I don't necessarily think that the original purpose of the 65% had to do with McMansions and some other things that were going to be terribly out of scale to a community. And I don't think this is one of those, but I'm concerned about the interpretation that you can pick and choose where the measurement begins and ends. I believe under the ordinance, everything that the architect has correctly shown in red technically does fall out. And I have not even implied that I'm not going to vote in favor of this thing. I was looking to get it as tight as we could, to get it as close to the 65% as we could get. If we could get 6 inches or 8 inches, I'd be happy also. But that was the purpose. I understand everything the architect has said, and I understand everything the applicant has said. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. That's as far as I can take it. Mr. Harrison, it's back in your court.
Okay. Graham, I'm trying to understand where Okay, if they were not doing the porch addition, they were just putting on what I'll call the main addition,
Mhm.
would it be in conformance or not? Or would
So-
it just be that tiny little bit that wouldn't be in
Well,
conformance?
yeah, there's a slight misalignment here, but yeah, I mean, if the addition, based on how we've reviewed plans, if the addition started from this point rearward, if this dimension was less than 65%, then that would be a compliant addition.
Even though if you looked at the entire front
Because
portion of the
element is
building,
separate, right?
and I mean, I somewhat agree with Mr. Fleischer that little bump out there, I'm willing to not ignore, but to say, okay, given that's just a small portion, deviate from that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to what was otherwise being asked now that I folded up plans. And kind of go over what Mr. Fleischer was saying. If we were giving you credit, even though it's not reducing the extent of the variance for the, if we were just measuring to the bulk of the west side of the house, not the two little bump outs, the one in front and the slightly smaller one behind that, do you know what the width would be then?
We would be under the 65%. So that second bump is the chimney projection. We would be under the 65% width if we did not account for those bumps.
So, I'm not, I mean, you're showing, this math is not my skill at this hour. Just bear with me. Okay, so the bulk of the west elevation is 1.41 feet, if I'm doing this correctly. You have 1.41 feet to extra to work if we ignore the, I mean, the chimney, my understanding, would not be counted.
Correct.
Front, okay, and and I thought it was, the deviation was more than 1.4 feet.
I was doing the math too. I don't know. My math was. Oh no, I had my math was the proposed dwelling width is 4.189 feet and the permitted is 40.63. Again, that was my rough math. I'm not sure.
Well, let me ask the architect, do you, do you agree with Mr. Petto's math of what he calculated in as being the correct dimensions of what the width?
By my dimensions, we are 6½ inch under the 65% width if we don't count that front porch. I've got a width of the existing at 26 feet 3 inches, and then the addition comes in at 10 inches.
So you're saying, okay, let's, the existing, from where to where are you measuring for the existing? And then what was that number again?
So I'm saying if we if we dispense with the front porch for a moment and look at the primary western facade, right? I think Mr. Petto's putting the line on that western facade, correct, there. And I measure from that green arrow across, yes, that line there. Then 65% of the lot width would be 40 feet 7 1/2 inch. And the building width there is 40 feet 1 inch.
Okay. But that, find my other calculation. So, okay, and there's an additional 1.41 feet to the edge of the existing house at that front, correct?
That is almost 2 feet. It's one.
No, it's you're going. I mean, you have that measured at 5.69 feet, and then you have at the back corner you have 7.1 feet.
Right, because the property line is at an angle relative to the home. So you'll notice that this red section that we're proposing here tapers to the rear yard.
Yep.
So that the building does not run parallel to the property line.
So what is the distance from the green line to the edge of the house there?
That measures 7 feet 8 inches.
No.
So I'm going to this dimension.
Oh, that dimension is 2 feet 1/2 inch. 0.5.
Oops.
And the other 7.1 at the other end. So it is closer at the back end of the house than it is at the front if you take off that porch addition, which we're not saying you should, just to clarify it.
Correct.
Okay.
And right.
Okay, so going back to, I'm looking at this two different ways that gives two different results, but going back, if we discount that slightly more than 2 feet, then you're fully conforming is what you're saying.
That is correct. Yes, we're conforming by 6 inches.
Okay. And Graham, how are you, from where to where are you measuring what the width is?
I did it. So I measured. Are you referring to the calculations that I have in my memo?
Yes.
Yes. So I basically took the width of the lot, subtracted 14.83 and 5.69. But again, that doesn't account for whether this is squared up.
And it's not squared up.
And it's not squared up, so.
No, but I think we are parallel to the front yard, or closer to parallel to that front yard. So I think it gets to somewhat semantic if we're talking about the 65% lot width coming at it, it's sort of in some sort of skewed line versus straight across. I think at the end of the day, that's going to be fractions of an inch when.
Right, I agree with that. I'm like Mr. Fleischer, I'm a little concerned with how this is being calculated in general, but I'm not sure it's relevant for this. Okay. Any other board members have any questions of the applicant or his architect?
I just have one more. We have the item 2 on the preservation commission's report talks about the shutters on the first floor should be eliminated. Is that acceptable to you?
That is entirely acceptable to my client and myself.
That's the only other question I had. Thank you.
With the shutters on this location.
I agree with the commission's finding that shutters on ganged windows are not historically appropriate. I 100% agree with that. The issue we were trying to do here was conform to the existing property that had that condition on the front. So that existing western right there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're fine removing those.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? Okay. Are there any members of the public who have comments, questions, testimony, statements, anything you want to say about the application?
Okay, all members of the public, at this time, we're accepting public questions or comments of this application. I'll be unmuting your lines. Please state your name if you have a question or a comment. All lines are now unmuted. Please state your name if you have a question or a comment on this application. Once again, we're accepting questions or comments on this application. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm not hearing any inquiries.
Okay. Anything further either of you want to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, we'll start discussion with Mr. Simon.
I'm in favor.
Okay, Ms. Harris,
I'm in favor.
Mr. Vieira,
I'm also in favor, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fleischer,
I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. Moore.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. Church.
Hang on, Mr. Church, I had muted you.
I'm in favor.
Mr. McCulloch.
I'm in favor.
Okay, I'm also in favor of the application. I think, given the varying, the small area where there's an actual exceedance, and given the way, this is not creating a solid wall that exceeds the ordinance. I think, given the elevations, this is not going to be either a substantial detriment to the public good or a substantial impairment to the zone plan. I think they're keeping within the intent of what the ordinance was trying to avoid by what they're proposing here. So I would also be in favor, subject to the condition that there be no shutters on the first floor as recommended by the Historic Preservation Commission. Someone want to make a motion?
Move approval of the application with the, oh God.
Condition.
with the conditions stated by the chair. I apologize.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Do you want to try and go finish the last application or take a break?
Let's try to finish up if we can.
Okay, okay. Next application is that of Keith Byers for property at 52 Carolin Road. This is an application for a variance to construct a new detached garage at the rear of the existing dwelling. The property is located in the R1 one-family zone. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 3 in Block 3505. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-46C1 to permit a maximum height of accessory structure greater than the permitted 15 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-46C2A to permit a side yard setback for an accessory structure of less than the required 6 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-46C3 to permit a rear yard setback for an accessory structure of less than the required 6 feet. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes. And we have Mr. Javier Fuentes as the architect again on this application, and the buyers are here as well. Can you hear us? Mr. Fuentes is here.
Yes.
And
Hello
Mr.
again,
Byers.
everyone.
Mr. Byers, are you present?
We are present. Hi, everyone.
Okay, Mr. Byers, would you and Mr. Fuentes, would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
Mr. Byers, give us your full name and address, please.
Keith Byers, 52 Carolin Road.
Mr. Fuentes, your full name and address, please.
Yes, Javier Enrique Fuentes Jr. and 612 Galloping Hill Road, Roseville Park, New Jersey.
And Mr. Fuentes, we've established that you're a registered architect in the state of New Jersey and your license is in good standing, correct?
That's right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, proceed and explain what you're proposing.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, again. And so this is 52 Carolin Road, Montclair, near the Brookdale Park. The condition of the site is that the existing garage as is in a location that's impractical for the property. It hinders any potential further improvement of the site to create something that's useful for their kids. And so our request here is to reconstruct the garage in a location that's much more comfortable and suitable and better used in the site. Currently as the garage is sitting, it's abutting the current property line, and due to the condition of the rear yard neighbor, it does puddle in that area, and so it's caused the wood to rot a bit for the existing garage. So we felt, in trying to create something that could be in a better location, try to create some distance, and then also create something that's a little bit more useful, as well as give better opportunity for potential improvement of the site. So you can see that we are requesting three variances, two of which are related to the setbacks of the property from the rear and the side. We're providing 3 feet so that it's still very comfortable to walk around, but at least it aligns with the current driveway, and that's the reasoning for the location. And also the height, considering that we're looking at this to create storage for the cars, but as well as utilizing it for a working table area, as well as having some storage opportunities up above, creating some comfort because of the condition of the roof. We're requesting to just have it raise it up a little higher, but what we've done is we've designed it in such a way that not only does it fit within the style of the existing house in respect of the design of the previous architect, we're also designing it in a way that breaks down the scale of the garage, so it doesn't feel as tall as it would seem if it was a just complete flat design. So that is pretty much it for the explanation of the project, and I open this up to you for any questions or comments.
Sorry, Mr. Harrison, you were muted. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
I have a couple. I sort of, at one level, I can understand the side yard setback. I don't understand the rear yard setback in this case. Certainly not going to affect the play area. It means the narrow part of the driveway has to start curving a little bit sooner. So I have problems with that rear yard setback, even if I was prepared in relative terms to allow for the 3 foot on the side yard. The other question I have is on the height. Now, I know you were just the architect for a residential building, and that residential building had 6'7" clear height for the entire first floor. And now we're saying that we can't be less than 7'1" for what is essentially primarily intended as a storage area, maybe with some workspace. So I have some problems with that exceeding it. We see lots of garages and lots of people who have storage and other facilities up there, but they manage to do it within the 15 foot. So I'm not comfortable with the 16 foot height. I don't think it's necessary. We've rarely allowed it other than where there's an existing historic structure of some sort that's been reconstructed. But in this case, I don't think it's necessary. And I haven't even checked, but you've got the same headroom underneath. And if you were concerned, you could probably lower the floor a bit and still give them the height and do it within the 15 foot if they wanted the height in the storage area. So those are basically my questions. One is, can it not be brought down to 15 foot by lowering either the height below the that storage level or above the storage level? And the second is, I need a better explanation than it used to be right on the property line, so now we're going to make it 3 foot away when the ordinance clearly calls for 6. So those are my 2 questions to you on it.
I understand. Yeah, and you know, in respect to the question of on the height previously from the condition here is that it is a new construction. So now the potential for it to you know, to be able to construct it in a way that has plenty of height, you know, we do have that ability to do so. You know, considering that inside of this being the garage where for the storage of the cars, we have to maintain a certain height in the first portion of it, but the storage area above, you know, it is as we see it, to be able to access that above is a little bit uncomfortable with the height where it would be because of the construction that would be required for the roof. So in how it is constructed, it would push us down, and basically at that pitch, it would put us at 6 feet. So it would make it really uncomfortable as you're taking, you know, taking up anything up above, but also taking the ladder up in that position, you know, sort of hinders that condition. You know, as far as the rear yard, I can understand your point on the condition. I would say that it does cause the condition of the driveway to then push us a little bit forward and closer towards the house. I don't know that I have anything better to say other than that we are trying to better the condition. It's as well as you know, create something that's a little bit more practical for the location.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Colleague Joe Fleischer asked a number of them for me.
Okay, Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question concerning where it's set on the back setback. Can't you move the garage forward a bit to get it away from that rear setback?
Yeah, so to that point, yeah, I don't disagree with Mr. Fleischer that they're, you know, pushing it forward a bit to be able to meet our the 6 feet on the rear yard. Understandably, yes, it's not it's a small sacrifice that you know, we can come to meet that requirement.
You can do that in your plans.
The potential is there because as is the condition of the site hasn't been improved. So in order to, the location where it's set will then create the opportunity for the future improvement of the site. So as of now, there's no other, there's nothing I can say really to that, except that, you know, we've tried our best to create something that is a suitable location for it.
If I can just add to Mr. Fuentes' point here, one thing that's not featured on the current plan displayed is a approval for a 12-foot deck from the previous architect. So that is something that we would want to preserve some level of space from the house and from the deck when considering a suitable location for the garage, both for us and for future owners. And there's essentially nothing behind this garage right now that would necessitate having more space than is absolutely needed behind the garage. It's trees and the neighbor's yard behind.
And that's all I have.
Okay, Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Caulfield, do you have any questions?
Yes, just two, I think. Where the garage is going to go, there's a bunch of trees there. I think there's an old oak that's dying there. Is that correct? That you have in that direction, on that side?
That is, I believe that's correct, right, Keith?
That is correct, yes.
And that tree is dying, I think, right? Because it's dying from the top down, it looks like.
You're correct, yes.
Okay. And you're going to replace trees with the town ordinance, right? File for that and whatever trees taken down. I have a deck just like that that's moved up to 6 feet, and I have a deck on the back there. I mean, I haven't understood. I agree that it is kind of not optimal, but I don't know. You're coming for two variances. I'd rather you just come for one with the side with the garage where it's going to be in that way. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Fuentes. Did you mention that the existing garage had water damage? Is that correct?
Yes. Where it's located now, because of the condition of the site, it slopes. It has a negative slope against the garage itself, so it has caused some bit of damage in the rear of the existing garage.
You have the same concern with this garage, and would moving it forward, moving it north another 3 feet will improve that condition?
I mean, I can't argue that it wouldn't. But I am conscious that, and I forgot to mention that Keith, as he mentioned, you know, there is a improvement for a deck design that is in place for this. So that's now my concern as I'm looking at it. But I can't disagree that it does improve that condition, putting it further away. So.
Okay, that's all.
If I can again just add to Mr. Fuentes' point there, the challenge with that drain pipe currently would be that it's in vertical alignment with the garage, not so much side to side. And the ability to construct new means we'd have a new foundation which can be at an appropriate height relative to the grading of the lot. So that problem is ultimately going to be resolved by new construction one way or another.
That's correct.
So I guess I have more problems than other board members with this. I mean, we have, 2 weeks ago, we justified a side yard variance for a garage based on where the existing driveway was located. And, we've justified other side or rear yard variances based on their building on the same footprint as the existing garage, or they're slightly improving the setback. This would be in terms of, this is new ground for us in terms of both rear and side yard setbacks is this is a new driveway location and a new garage location. So there's really starting with a fresh slate, and I'm having difficulties justifying granting those variances. And, you know, and as Mr. Fleischer said, in terms of the height variance, you know, we've had a number of other garages that have had a second level storage area that have conformed to the 15 feet, and I'm not immediately understanding why that can't be done here. But I guess my question is, what is driving the location of, let's start with the location of the garage, in terms of why are you putting it where you're putting it, and why are you requesting the variance from both rear and side yard?
I think the ultimate objective, sir, is to achieve a larger yard space for kids to play. And having the existing structure dead center in the yard is very restrictive in that regard. And as Mr. Fuentes had presented earlier, creates a challenge for future improvements to the space in general. So put simply, it's a more practical location for a garage in line with the driveway at the side of the house.
I mean, that part, I mean, I certainly understand why you don't want the garage in the middle, because that and the driveway leading to it eliminates most of your rear yard. I have no problem with it being shifted over. I think the question is how much. For the second floor, you said primarily storage. Is there any other use other than storage that's proposed for that that's leading to the height?
No, there's no other usage above except just for storage. And again, it's so that, you know, we've designed the floor to take greater load. So that's the construction. That's why the construction of the floor are 2x12s as opposed to something that is you know, not as strong, something smaller. So that does push us up a little bit in that condition. And so the height under the ridge of the roof, considering the location of where we are accessing that through the ladder, you know, we wanted something affixed. And so in doing so, you know, we're trying to better the condition of the height of that in that location. So it does become a little bit more challenging to do so, being that it would be lower. You know, so we're not asking for like an additional 3 feet. We're just asking for an additional foot to be able to create a better height in that position.
Are there any members of the public who have questions, testimony, statements, anything you want to say about the application? We'll now unmute your microphones, and you should speak up if you want to comment or ask questions about the application.
All members of the public, your lines are now unmuted. If anyone has a comment or a question, please state your name and we'll bring it into the meeting. Once again, any public questions or comments at this time? And Mr. Chairman, I'm not hearing any questions or comments.
Okay. Mr. Fuentes, Mr. Byers, do you have anything further to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
No, I don't have any further comments.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start discussion with Ms. Harris.
I think, given the fact that this is a brand new garage, and the owner has the ability to conform to the zoning ordinance, I haven't heard any compelling reasons why we can't respect the required setbacks. I would be disinclined to approve that variance, and I also have not heard any compelling reasons why the height of the garage needs to be what it is. If it's not a space that's being occupied regularly, I don't see why it requires a 7-foot clear height in there.
Okay. Mr. Caulfield?
I agree on the height issue of the garage. I do definitely think it should be brought somewhat into compliant. And for the garage itself, I see where it needs to be put into that position, but I'd rather it be pushed up and maybe eliminating one of the variances. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ventura?
Did you call me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm also with my colleagues. I feel that the height can be adjusted to comply with the 15 feet height, as well as the rear yard setback. It can be pushed a little way. Other than that, I think I understand the side yard setback being 3 foot, but other than that, I think I'm okay.
Mr. Fleischer?
I'd probably come out with Ms. Harris and Chair Harrison come out that there's really no justification under the regulations or anything else in this particular case to grant any of the 3 variances. So I would be disinclined to approve this application with regard to both yard variances and to the height.
Okay, Mr. Moore?
Given the reasons also stated by my colleagues, I'm generally not in favor of the application.
Mr. Church?
I also would not be in favor of this application. I believe conforming with the height requirement would be a simple thing to do because it's only a storage area. So, and the setback can be adjusted. I'm not in favor of this application.
Mr. McCulloch?
Yeah, I'm also not in favor of the application.
Mr. Simon?
I would support the side yard setback to 3 feet because I think there's been enough cases throughout where we probably need to review that measurement as part of the actual ordinance to 3 feet. But I don't see any hardship for the rear and height. So I'd support 1 out of the 3 requested.
I'm not in favor of any of the variances. I think, we have confronted many garage applications. We have, fairly consistently insisted on the 3 feet where the existing encroachment was greater than, it was closer than 3 feet to the property line. And those were always justified either by where the prior garage was located or where the driveway was located. The application we just did immediately before this, while they came in for a variance on the house width, they were also totally relocating their garage and they placed it in a fully conforming location at a fully conforming height. So I think it's hard to come up with a rationale. I don't think there have been any reasons given that would justify anything that's exceptional or unique about the property that would justify granting the variances. But we've had some divergence of opinion. Is there any further discussion among members of the board? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
Move denial of the application as submitted.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fleischer, I was going to suggest that maybe we pull out the side yard setback variance since there seems to be a difference of opinion on that.
Okay, how do we want to?
I think the first motion should be with reference to the height variance and the rear yard setback.
Move denial of the applicant's request for the height variance and rear yard setback.
Okay, Graham, I think you should call the roll just so there's no confusion, uncertainty as to
Yep.
Um,
Hey, Ms. Harris,
And if a yes vote is to deny, a no vote would be against denying those two variances.
Yes.
and Mr. Simon,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. McCullough,
Yes.
Mr. Church,
Yes.
Mr. Fleischer,
Yes,
Mr. Harrison.
Yes. And now someone needs to make a motion either way on the side yard variance.
I make a motion to approve the side yard variance.
So Mr. Moore has a motion to approve the side yard variance request.
Is there a second?
Second.
Simon with the second.
Hey, Graham, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Ms. Harris,
And this is, a yes vote would be in favor of granting the side yard variance, a no vote would be against granting the side yard variance.
Ms. Harris?
No.
No. Okay. Mr. Simon,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. McCullough,
No, no,
Mr. Church,
No.
Mr. Fleischer,
no,
Mr. Harrison.
No.
Okay, so that motion fails. The variance is denied also.
Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn, I believe, but first, before we do that, Graham, it's been a pleasure having you as our real
What's this?
secretary and assistant planner for town. We appreciate all the work you've done. We're going to miss you. I'm sure I will be running into you in your new position at some point in the future, and we'll see you then. But good luck for you, and as I said, you've been great and a wonderful asset to the board.
Just want to thank everybody for it's been a great 6 years that I've been here with the board, and I appreciate all the experience I've gotten with you all. So thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for all your volunteer service and hours that you spend here. So greatly appreciated.
Okay.
thanks, Graham, all the best.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay, and we'll see all of you in 2 weeks, and other than Graham, and I suspect we'll see Janice then.
Yes.
They have done an ad to replace Graham, but there's no way that can happen that quickly. Okay, someone want to move to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank
Night.
you. Good night.
Bye, Graham.
Good night.
Take care, Graham. Take care.
Bye, Graham.
Best of luck, Graham.
Thank you so much.